Hey, this is Ralph. I was over at the MDN website and I saw this little section here where they were kind of displaying a list, an outline, and they have these little lines attaching them. And I kind of like that. Now, what they've got here is a picture, but I'd like to be able to do this with an unordered list. I've created an unordered list with a series of list items, which I think has a pretty pleasing little kind of line attachment. So let's see how we can go about creating this. So on the markup, we're going to start as simple as possible here, and I think I'm going to leave this on here, but I've got a heading 2, which in theory is the title or the heading for my list, and then I have an unordered list. Now I gave it a class because it's reasonable that you might have multiple unordered lists on your web page, but I only want the list with this class to have this particular styling. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it on there. It's a normal unordered list, but this one has class equals list lines, which I created myself. Now the CSS for this is going to be pretty simple. Let me delete what I have though, because that makes it too easy if we start from there. And before styling my new list items, I do want to point out that I did create a set font size in my HTML rule. By the way, that 62.5%, that is simply 10 divided by 16, which is going to allow us to very easily use the root M unit, the rem unit, so that we can do some nice even spacing on things. So let's go ahead and get to work. Now, since I've taken out those stylings, we can see the default look for my unordered list is what it should be. It's a bulleted list, and those are the bullets. So let's start to control this a bit. So dot list lines. Let me just confirm. That's what I had. Class equals list lines. That looks good. So whenever I do a list lines unordered list, I definitely want to get rid of those bullets, so I'm going to do list style none for those. But then I also want to have that vertical line, so I'm going to do that with a border left, and I'm going to do 4 pixels thick, solid, and BBB should be a nice shade of gray. So that's going to give us that gray border there, that vertical border. Okay, I'm feeling pretty good about that, but I want to move it in a little bit, so I'm going to give it some nice margin left. And my margin left, I'm going to do 2.5 rems. Now, because I did that 62.5% font size, 2.5 rems is going to be pretty equivalent to 25 pixels. So it's a way to give us some nice specific measurements, specific widths and sizes and spaces, but they're still relative. So when the font size changes, then all of these other things are going to change too. So I want a little bit of margin left. That's going to push it in. Remember, margin is outside the border. Padding is inside the border, and I want some padding as well. So I'm going to do padding left 1.5 rems, and that's going to create, when I refresh, some nice spacing there that I think is going to look pretty good. Let's move on to the list items themselves. Remember, list lines is an unordered list, and so now I can move to the list items that are inside of that. And for those, I'm going to do a font size of like 1.2 rems, and that font size is about 12 pixels. Now I'm also going to put some margin on these list items to kind of give them some space from each other. And let's see, I'm going to do 1.5 rems top and bottom, 0 left and right. When you do 0, you don't have to put a unit of measurement on there. 0 is 0 for everything. But I'm also going to put some padding left on here of, now let's just do it small, 0.5 rems. Let's see how this looks. So I just want to create some nice vertical space between my list items and plenty of space over here on the left of the list items. All right, I think that's looking pretty good. We're probably going to come back to this, but let's go ahead and take care of those vertical lines. Now those horizontal lines. Those horizontal lines, list lines, li : before. We're going to do a pseudo element for this. And let's see. Content will be an empty set of quotes, and I always like to do display block whenever I'm doing a pseudo element, just to make sure I've got some structure on there. What I'll be creating with this pseudo element is basically a little rectangle. The width of this rectangle will be 2 rems, about 20 pixels, and it's going to have a height, let's see, how about 0.4 rems? That's just like 4 pixels. I'm going to choose a background color. I'm going to start off with 900, which is red, but ultimately I'm going to change that to that same shade of gray that I'm using for that vertical line. And then I'm going to do a position absolute. Now when I position something absolutely, it should be in a relatively positioned container. So let me jump back up to my list items here and do a position relative on that. So position relative on the list items, and then I'll do position absolute on the list item pseudo element. And I'll start off with something like left of 0, top. Let's do top of 0 as well, just to see how that's going to look starting off. And that gives us a feel for where these lines are. Okay. Now for the left, I need to move those further left than they want to be. So I'm going to put in negative. And how about let's start off with 1.5 rems. Now I'm picking that 1.5 rems because I have a margin on my list items of 1.5 rems. So that should push those lines quite a bit over there. Okay, actually might go a little bit further so that they actually cover up that portion of the gray line. So what if I did something like 1.9 rems? Now how did I come up with that? Well, don't forget my little bars, my border left is 4 pixels. I really could have done 0.4 rems there. And of course 0.4 plus 1.5 gets me to 1.9, and that'll kind of get those lines covering up really, really nicely on there. Now, since my font size is 1.2 rems, and I want these lines to look like they're halfway in, I'm going to move them down from the top, 0.6 rems, half of 1.2, and that's going to kind of get those lines in a pretty nice position. Now, I need to move these entire list items down a little bit, so what I'm going to do there is, since I have a position relative on those list items, I should be able to move them downward. This will be the entire list item, the text itself plus the pseudo element line, and I'll also do let's try 0.6 rems. Remember, that's going to be about 6 pixels there, and I think that's going to look pretty good. So now I just need to take these red lines, change them to BBB, which is going to be that shade of gray, and now we get that nice clean look with those outline lines on there. It required a couple of unusual things, including some pseudo elements and some positioning. Thanks for hanging out with me, but stick around for the next video, and we'll see what we can do with some variables and calculations. Thanks.